Section 17 of Confessions, Volumes 1 and 2. This Librivox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Martin Geeson. Confessions, Volumes 1 and 2, by Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Anonymously translated. Section 17. To return to our Aegisthus, the fluter, it was remarkable that in becoming more insupportable, the traitor put on the appearance of complaisance. From the first day Madame Basile had taken me under her protection, she had endeavored to make me serviceable in the warehouse, and finding I understood arithmetic tolerably well, she proposed his teaching me to keep the books, a proposition that was but indifferently received by this humorist, who might perhaps be fearful of being supplanted. As this failed, my whole employ, besides what engraving I had to do, was to transcribe some bills and accounts, to write several books over fair, and translate commercial letters from Italian into French. All at once he thought fit to accept the before rejected proposal, saying he would teach me bookkeeping by double entry, and put me in a situation to offer my services to Monsieur Basile on his return. But there was something so false, malicious, and ironical in his air and manner, that it was by no means calculated to inspire me with confidence. Madame Basile replied archly that I was much obliged to him for his kind offer, but she hoped fortune would be more favorable to my merits, for it would be a great misfortune, with so much sense, that I should only be a pitiful clerk. She often said she would procure me some acquaintance that might be useful. She doubtless felt the necessity of parting with me, and had prudently resolved on it. Our mute declaration had been made on Thursday. The Sunday following she gave a dinner. A Jacobin of good appearance was among the guests, to whom she did me the honor to present me. The monk treated me very affectionately, congratulated me on my late conversion, mentioned several particulars of my story, which plainly showed he had been made acquainted with it, then, tapping me familiarly on the cheek, bade me be good, to keep up my spirits, and come to see him at his convent, where he should have more opportunity to talk with me. I judged him to be a person of some consequence by the deference that was paid him, and by the paternal tone he assumed with Madame Basile to be her confessor. I likewise remember that his decent familiarity was attended with an appearance of esteem and even respect for his fair penitent, which then made less impression on me than at present. Had I possessed more experience, how should I have congratulated myself on having touched the heart of a young woman respected by her confessor? The table not being large enough to accommodate all the company, a small one was prepared, where I had the satisfaction of dining with our agreeable clerk. But I lost nothing with regard to attention and good cheer, for several plates were sent to the side table, which were certainly not intended for him. Thus far all went well. The ladies were in good spirits, and the gentlemen very gallant, while Madame Basile did the honours of the table with peculiar grace. In the middle of the dinner, we heard a chaise stop at the door, and presently some one coming upstairs. It was Monsieur Basile. Methinks I now see him entering in his scarlet coat with gold buttons. From that day I have held the colour in abhorrence. Monsieur Basile was a tall, handsome man of good address. He entered with a consequential look, and an air of taking his family unawares, though none but friends were present. His wife ran to meet him, threw her arms about his neck, and gave him 1,000 caresses, which he received with the utmost indifference, and without making any return, saluted the company and took his place at table. They were just beginning to speak of his journey, when, casting his eye on the small table, he asked in a sharp tone what lad that was. Madame Basile answered ingenuously. He then inquired whether I lodged in the house, and was answered in the negative. "Why not?" replied he rudely. "Since he stays here all day, he might as well remain all night too." The monk now interfered with a serious and true eulogium on Madame Basile. In a few words he made mine also, adding that so far from blaming, he ought to further the pious charity of his wife, since it was evident she had not passed the bounds of discretion. The husband answered with an air of petulance, which, restrained by the presence of the monk, he endeavored to stifle. It was, however, sufficient to let me understand he had already received information of me, and that our worthy clerk had rendered me an ill office. We had hardly risen from table when the latter came in triumph from his employer, to inform me I must leave the house that instant, and never more during my life dare to set foot there. He took care to aggravate this commission by everything that could render it cruel and insulting. I departed without a word, my heart overwhelmed with sorrow, less for being obliged to quit this amiable woman than at the thought of leaving her to the brutality of such a husband. He was certainly right to wish her faithful, but though prudent and well born, she was an Italian, that is to say, tender and vindictive, which made me think he was extremely imprudent in using means the most likely in the world to draw on himself the very evil he so much dreaded. Such was the success of my first adventure. I walked several times up and down the street, wishing to get a sight of what my heart incessantly regretted, but I could only discover her husband, or the vigilant clerk, who, perceiving me, made a sign with the L they used in the shop, which was more expressive than alluring. Finding, therefore, that I was so completely watched, my courage failed, and I went no more. I wished at least to find out the patron she had provided me, but unfortunately I did not know his name. I ranged several times round the convent, endeavoring in vain to meet with him. At length other events banished the delightful remembrance of Madame Basile, and in a short time I so far forgot her that I remained as simple, as much a novice as ever, nor did my penchant for pretty women even receive any sensible augmentation. Her liberality had, however, increased my little wardrobe, though she had done this with precaution and prudence, regarding neatness more than decoration, and to make me comfortable rather than brilliant. The coat I had brought from Geneva was yet wearable, she only added a hat and some linen. I had no ruffles, nor would she give me any, not but I felt a great inclination for them. She was satisfied with having put it in my power to keep myself clean, though a charge to do this was unnecessary while I was to appear before her. A few days after this catastrophe, my hostess, who, as I have already observed, was very friendly, with great satisfaction informed me she had heard of a situation, and that a lady of rank desired to see me. I immediately thought myself in the road to great adventures, that being the point to which all my ideas tended. This, however, did not prove so brilliant as I had conceived it. I waited on the lady with the servant who had mentioned me. She asked a number of questions, and my answers not displeasing her, I immediately entered into her service, not indeed in the quality of favourite, but as a footman. I was clothed like the rest of her people, the only difference being they wore a shoulder knot, which I had not, and as there was no lace on her livery, it appeared merely a tradesman's suit. This was the unforeseen conclusion of all my great expectancies. The Comtesse de Vercellis, with whom I now lived, was a widow without children. Her husband was a Piedmontese, but I always believed her to be a Savoyard, as I could have no conception that a native of Piedmont could speak such good French, and with so pure an accent. She was a middle-aged woman of a noble appearance and cultivated understanding, being fond of French literature, in which she was well versed. Her letters had the expression and almost the elegance of Madame de Sevigne's. Some of them might have been taken for hers. My principal employ, which was by no means displeasing to me, was to write from her dictating, a cancer in the breast, from which she suffered extremely, not permitting her to write herself. Madame de Vercellis not only possessed a good understanding, but a strong and elevated soul. I was with her during her last illness, and saw her suffer and die without showing an instant of weakness, or the least effort of constraint, still retaining her feminine manners, without entertaining an idea that such fortitude gave her any claim to philosophy, a word which was not yet in fashion, nor comprehended by her in the sense it is held at present. This strength of disposition sometimes extended almost to apathy, ever appearing to feel as little for others as herself. And when she relieved the unfortunate, it was rather for the sake of acting right than from a principle of real commiseration. I frequently experienced this insensibility in some measure during the 3 months I remained with her. It would have been natural to have had an esteem for a young man of some abilities who was incessantly under her observation, and that she should think, as she felt her dissolution approaching, that after her death he would have occasion for assistance and support. But whether she judged me unworthy of particular attention, or that those who narrowly watched all her motions gave her no opportunity to think of any but themselves, she did nothing for me. I very well recollect that she showed some curiosity to know my story, frequently questioning me, and appearing pleased when I showed her the letters I wrote to Madame de Warrens, or explained my sentiments. But as she never discovered her own, she certainly did not take the right means to come at them. My heart, naturally communicative, loved to display its feelings whenever I encountered a similar disposition; but dry, cold interrogatories, without any sign of blame or approbation on my answers, gave me no confidence. Not being able to determine whether my discourse was agreeable or displeasing, I was ever in fear, and thought less of expressing my ideas than of being careful not to say anything that might seem to my disadvantage. I have since remarked that this dry method of questioning themselves into people's characters is a common trick among women who pride themselves on superior understanding. These imagine that by concealing their own sentiments they shall the more easily penetrate into those of others, being ignorant that this method destroys the confidence so necessary to make us reveal them. A man, on being questioned, is immediately on his guard, and if once he supposes that, without any interest in his concerns, you only wish to set him a-talking, either he entertains you with lies, is silent, or, examining every word before he utters it, rather chooses to pass for a fool than to be the dupe of your curiosity. In short, it is ever a bad method to attempt to read the hearts of others by endeavoring to conceal our own. End of section 17. Recording by Martin Geeson in Hazelmere, Surrey.